we continue and probably conclude Pyrrhus from Plutarch's Lies, translated by John Dryden, revised by Hugh Clough. He, advancing within a short distance, made an halt, but sent in some of his principal commanders, and his son with a considerable force. Pyrrhus came thither too, with 1,000 Cretans, and some of the most active men among the Spartans, and all falling on at once upon the Gauls, put them in great disorder. Pyrrhus entering in with noise and shouting, near the Caloribes, when the Gauls returned the cry, noticed that it did not express courage and assurance, but was the voice of men distressed, and that had their hands full. He, therefore, pushed forward in haste the van of his horse, that marched but slowly and dangerously, by reason of the drains and sinks of which the city is full. In this night engagement there was infinite uncertainty as to what was being done, or what orders were given. There was much mistaking and struggling in the narrow streets. All generalship was useless in that darkness and noise and pressure, so both sides continued without doing anything, expecting daylight. At the first dawn, Pyrrhus, seeing the great citadel as peace, full of enemies, was disturbed, and remarking, among a variety of figures dedicated in the marketplace, a wolf and a bull of brass, as it were ready to attack one another, he was struck with alarm, recollecting an oracle that formerly predicted fate had determined his death when he should see a wolf fighting with a bull. The Argives say these figures were set up in a record of things that long ago had happened there. For Danaus, at his first landing in the country, near the Paramia in Theratis, as he was on his way towards Argos, espied a wolf fighting with a bull, and conceiving that the wolf represented him, for the stranger fell upon a native as he designed to do, stayed to see the issue of the fight, and the wolf prevailing, he offered vows to Apollo Lacheus, and thus made his attempt upon the town, and succeeded. Gilanor, who was then king, being displaced by a faction, and this was the cause of dedicating those figures. In the Rumi cards, isn't there, or is it a lion attacking a bull? Pyrrhus, quite out of heart at this sight, and seeing none of his designs succeed, thought best to retreat, but fearing the narrow passage at the gate, sent his son Helenus, who was left without the town, with a great part of his forces, commanding him to break down part of the wall, and assist the retreat if the enemy pressed hard upon them. But what with haste and confusion, the person that was sent delivered nothing clearly, so that, quite mistaking the young prince with the best of his men and the remaining elephants, marched straight through the gates into the town to assist his father. Pyrrhus was now making good his retreat, and while the marketplace afforded them ground enough both to retreat and fight, frequently repulsed the enemy that bore upon him. But when he was forced out of that broad place into the narrow street leading to the gate, and fell in with those who came the other way to his assistance, some did not hear him call out to them to give back, and those who did, however, eager to obey him, were pushed forward by others behind, who poured in at the gate. Besides, the largest of his elephants falling down on his side in the very gate, and lying roaring on the ground, was in the way of those that would have got out. Another of the elephants, already in town, called Nikon, striving to take up his rider, who after many wounds received was fallen off his back, bore forward upon those that were retreating, and thrusting upon friends as well as enemies, tumbled them all confusedly upon one another, till having found the body and taken it up with his trunk, he carried it on his tusks, and returning in a fury, trod down all before him. Being thus pressed and crowded together, not a man could do anything for himself, but being wedged, as it were, together into one mass, the whole multitude rolled and swayed this way and that altogether, and did very little execution either upon the enemy in their rear or in any of them who were intercepted in the mass, but very much harm to one another. For he who either had drawn his sword or directed his lance could neither restore it again nor put his sword up. With these weapons they wounded their own men as they happened to come in the way, and they were dying by mere contact with each other. Pyrrhus, seeing this storm and confusion of things, he took off the crown he wore upon his helmet, by which he was distinguished, and gave it to one nearest his person, and trusting to the goodness of his horse, rode in among the thickest of the enemy, and being wounded with the lance through his breastplate, but not dangerously, nor indeed very much, he turned about upon the man who struck him, who was an Argive, not of any illustrious birth, but the son of a poor old woman. She was looking upon the fight, among other women, from the top of a house, and perceiving her son engaged with Pyrrhus, and affrighted at the danger he was in, took up a tile with both hands and threw it at Pyrrhus, this falling on his head, below the helmet, and bruising the vertebra of the lower part of the neck, stunned and blinded him. His hands let go the reins, and sinking down from his horse, he fell just by the tomb of Licymnius. The common soldiers knew not who it was, but one Pyrrhus, who served under Antigonus, and 2 or 3 others running thither, and knowing it was Pyrrhus, dragged him to a doorway hard by, just as he was recovering a little from the blow. But when Pyrrhus drew out an Illyrian sword, ready to cut off his head, Pyrrhus gave him so fierce a look that confounded the terror, and sometimes the hands trembling, and then again endeavoring to do it, full of fear and confusion, he could not strike him right, but cutting over his mouth and chin. It was a long time before he got off the head. By this time what had happened was known to a great many, and Alcaeus, hastening to the place, desired to look upon the head and see whether he knew it, and taking it in his hand, rode away to his father, and threw it at his feet, while he was sitting with some of his particular favorites. Antigonus, looking upon it, and knowing it, thrust his son from him, and struck him with his staff, calling him wicked and barbarous, and covering his eyes with his robe, shed tears, thinking of his own father and grandfather, instances in his own family, and the changefulness of fortune, and caused the head and body of Pyrrhus to be burned with all due solemnity. After this, Alcaeus, discovering Helenus under a mean disguise in a threadbare coat, used him very respectfully, and brought him to his father. When Antigonus saw him, "This, my son," said he, "is better, and yet even now you have not done wholly well in allowing these clothes to remain, to the disgrace of those who, it seems now, are the victors, and treating Helenus with the great kindness as became a prince, restored him to his kingdom of Epirus, and gave the same obliging reception to all Pyrrhus's principal commanders, his camp and the whole army having fallen into his hands. Now, as much as I've said the cutting off of heads or limbs or something in the middle of a battle, that's totally different than taking trophies. I'm definitely not in support of people chopping off of heads and carrying them off to, see, look at who I killed. Yeah, no. But when the battle, this, the clothes per se are, part of the battle spoils, and, the right goes towards the victor, I do support that. Not that the person's supposed to, the deceased, their body's supposed to lay naked in the field. I mean, they're supposed to be buried, but yeah.